blinking green.
Good? Lisa, we're good.
Okay, we'll go ahead and call the meeting. It is time 5:54. All councilmen and councilwomen are present.
Ready?
Ready as I'll ever be.
All right.
15 minutes.
Make this one short. Melanie Purcell, Finance Director. As promised, we requested a meeting with you to go over kind of kick off our budget season. Obviously, with certain circumstances around us, we're kind of modifying that a little bit to discuss current year as well as kind of a look forward, recognizing that the reason there's a question mark is we don't know how long this is going to go. So, recurring theme you're going to hear tonight is the uncertainty factor, and that we are doing some guessing, but as scientifically oriented as we can get with as much data as we can get our hands on. So we stumbled across this. A. Latimer is famous only for this quote, but pretty good quote. The budget is a mathematical confirmation of your suspicions. Nothing I'm going to tell you tonight is probably a news bulletin. Okay, this should not be a surprise, I hope. It definitely is. Each day we peel back another layer, we find a little more information. Nothing is turning our perceptions significantly at this point.
Melanie, and I know Councilman Orona mentioned this, but I haven't heard anything. With the corona, do we see the government handing out any kind of help, or the state?
No.
You heard differently?
If I may on that, Mayor.
I mean, I took that job what you did, but I just kind of know if we can even count on anybody for a little bit or something.
I'm not sure that we can. All the notifications that we're getting from TML and from other sources are saying that the cities that have 500,000 or more population are guaranteed to receive funding. After that, they're likely to pass it out to those cities that have been deeply impacted. And so it's a blessing that we have not had more cases here in Reeves County, but we're also probably not going to see any money because we have not had a lot of cases. And as far as subsidies to help businesses or to help them get back on, it's really going to depend on what comes out of Congress with stimulus packages. But there's no guarantees how far that money will spread.
And that's what I heard on the reading about the stimulus bills that they want to pass. Right now, it's still in negotiations. Democrat want to give money to those smaller communities that have been affected by the lack of sales tax, but it's still a bill that's being negotiated with Democrats and Republicans. Yeah, so they're all trying to get their own important bills for pieces of the pie there. So
We receive a weekly update through the Government Finance Officers Association. Several of us who are on the committees, we find out basically how the different lobby groups from the National League of Cities, the Counties Association, state budget officers, at this point, the only thing that they have been able to really get through has been a little bit of loosening up on the credit market so that the Federal Reserve is at least keeping some level of demand for municipal bonds. At this point, that's the only thing happening. I'll find out obviously a little bit more tomorrow's call, but as you stated, it really is how much negotiation goes forward, the depth and breadth, I like the word, how far it goes and how deep it's being felt is so large at this time that the magnitude would be very difficult for the federal government to absorb without significant changes to some of the structures. So at this point, they really just aren't equipped to even say anything. We are pursuing grants and expense offsets for direct purchase personal protection gear, those kind of things. That has been made available through DOJ and some of the others. However, we fortunately, as you mentioned, we have been very fortunate. We have not needed the magnitude of a lot of agencies. We have needed some, and we have had a few tests, and obviously running a jail, we have to maintain that. But at this point, we've been able to absorb it. We do put in for the grants, but again, it's going to be pretty nominal.
and with that, it's maybe a little bit off the budget situation that we're going through right now or discussing, but we've not been that dramatically impacted by the COVID economically. No restaurants have closed, but there's still business. Not everybody has shut down completely, other than the ones that were required by the state. But we got to be smart about this, and I'm talking about everybody, all of us, community, in Reeves County and inside Pecos. Just because we feel that we are pretty false in security, we only have 7, possibly 8, you know, so don't get into a false sense of security. Be protective about one another, about yourself. When you go, especially when you go to bigger, other areas, other towns, protect yourself, because you're coming back to this town. And you could bring something, not willingly, but you just don't know. So even in town, and I just like to utter what you said, Mayor, is maybe we all need to take the lead to start wearing our masks and show people that this is the only way we're gonna fight this and keep it at a low number that we have.
And I know that, like, we can't count on the prisoners because they're federal prisoners, I guess. But we have to be able to count with employees, because 80% of us work for the county. We get paid by the county. We don't get a direct check from the Bureau, of course, even though the Bureau makes up the money. That counts for staff, doesn't it, if they need protective equipment as well?
When we, so through our jail, we have to provide it, and we do, and then we seek reimbursement back from the feds. So through the marshal's contract, we have direct reimbursement for specific items, overtime, transport, things like that. And then we have the overall expense payment that they make to us on a per diem. But it's actually totally outside of that contract. We would be seeking reimbursement for PPE for all of our officers, as well as for the jail. So we are, obviously we're experiencing the COVID-19, a lot of shutdown. The reduced revenues is pretty significant. We have some pretty direct expenses, albeit, as I stated, fairly small at this time. We do, however, have an increased leave time liability. Right now, we have not seen the majority of employees, thankfully, be sick or have to deal with somebody being sick. We're coming up to the end of the spring school obligation, but that does reopen August 15th, in which case we would have to provide paid leave to parents who have to take care of their kids under 17. So it is impacting all of our funds, most drastically the general fund and the hot funds, and we'll go into what that means and what that looked like. We also, just prior to COVID hitting the news and hitting the world, had started to see some slowdown, obviously in the oil fields. So that activity reduction has now also reduced revenues. Little bit of a reduction in call volume and activity levels in town, so we have less people around. However, it's not a 1-for-1. It is not, as I call it, an equal offset. Your revenue goes down and your activity goes down, but not as much. So you still have plenty to pay for that's not necessarily covered by that increased revenue. Again, it's impacting everything, but most drastically, and the greatest impact is to the general and the hot funds. Sanitation, we started the slowdown there last summer with needing to comply with the TCEQ permit limits. So we stopped taking trash from outside of town, focus being on serving our own residents. We continued that. We are seeing some reduction, especially on the commercial side, for those activities. So we don't really have an idea how that's going to play out and what that's going to look like yet. Obviously, with all of the other activity that we started undertaking in the last 2 years, updating things, bringing things current, some of our data is a little awash with what's new, what's impactful, how does it actually compare. Some of the other things going on is, as I mentioned, we're reviewing all the major capital projects. We have quite a few. Any of you guys gone by Veterans Park lately? Projects really underway. We also have been deeply immersed in looking at improvements in processes. How do we do things? So are we doing it faster, better, more efficiently? Are we complying? You received a memo from me last month that the FY 18-19 audit has not been finalized. I'm very proud of the staff for the progress we've made. It has been a Herculean effort, but it's not finished. That means that our data is not as clean as we need it to be to make solid projections going forward. With that is the conversion and the cleanup of the accounting system. So we have spent a lot of fun. I was teasing Mr. Sorensen the other day. I had a stack about 4 inches tall of just data printouts, going through every transaction that we had done over a 4 or 5 month period, trying to make sure it had actually hit where it was supposed to hit. So we're at that level of data cleanup. We're constantly changing data. We're looking at all these different environmental activities, internal activities that are influencing the ability of the organization to react and assess where it's at. The other piece that is very much an external deadline but impacts obviously these conversations is the state through SB2 mandated that we had 6 weeks less to prepare the budget this year. So it moved it up to August 15th instead of September 30th. So that's why we started with we need this calendar, we need to start this date, trying to compact it so as not to bog everybody down, but also recognizing this is the most important action you will take as an elected official of the city, is to adopt the policy and operational document, the financial plan for the city. So we want to make sure you have the information necessary. Other things taking place, we are looking at, as I mentioned, some reduction likely, but we don't know for sure. We don't have enough information yet. We haven't seen enough play out of sanitation, commercial waste particularly, bulk wastewater, and the commercial water usage. We don't know how that's going to play out yet. Traffic citation revenue is also down, which is actually not a bad thing, except that it's not because people are slowing down and we have less people driving. It's because we really don't want to put citizens or officers at any more risk than we have to. That doesn't mean we aren't stopping people. It just means we might not stop all of them as fast as we might otherwise. We are seeing a postponement of private investment. This has implications for permit fees, obviously for future property taxes, some construction costs, sales tax items. We are also seeing the excess short-term housing capacity. So when the oil fields start to pick back up, we don't know that we will see quite the hotel-motel activity that we have, because there's now going to be some very fierce competition for those visitors and short-term residents. So recognizing that we do have quite a bit of short-term, we still need long-term permanent residents, but we do have quite a bit of short-term, and that has implications for, certainly for the hot fund especially. Some of the concerns I've mentioned: uncertainty. Just that's a given right now. We don't know. The magnitude of this particular recession and this pandemic is that it has happened so fast, and the impacts are we're still not even sure what the impacts are in such an incredibly short time. We know that nationally there's at least 30 million unemployed. People are still not able to even file for unemployment. 30 million people becoming unemployed in a 3-month period is unheard of. There's no historical precedent for us to react to this. So the data gathering makes this an incredibly uncertain experience for everybody. We don't know the extent of the travel and shopping downturn. Obviously, with the loosening up of the legal restrictions, that means that we have some opportunity. However, as you mentioned, just because we can doesn't necessarily mean we should. Do we really want to go out and play and visit and be up close and personal? Maybe, maybe not. The other side of this is COVID waves. If you read the news, you'll hear everything from, we think we may have it under control, to expect 2, maybe 3 more waves. Depending on who you look at, who you talk at, you could be incredibly depressed or you could be wildly optimistic. I'm an economist, so I tend to be on the more distant side just because money talks. So looking at what does this mean, what is the implication? We do know that because of the impact of the coronavirus, there is less capacity to deal with any other type of disaster. So that is something that we certainly, from your administration side, are keeping in mind. We do expect to have, everything's pointing to record heat this summer. What does that mean? I don't know yet. I'll let you know in a couple of months, maybe in a couple of weeks, judging by today's temps. It said 107 today.
6. So, round it up.
Hot enough. So part of the issue that comes into play for government is the lag for revenue recovery. We do have market behavior tax revenue impacts. So markets start to pick back up. Government revenues, though, can lag up to 36 months behind. So while we might start to see more traffic, we will be a minimum of 2 months to 6 months behind that, potentially as far out as 36 months. Property tax revenue is a given 3 years in lag time, just because of the way assessment schedules work. So recognizing that we don't know what that's going to mean to us and how long it's gonna take. The other uncertainty, of course, is if and when shale oil returns and at what level, and if and when our businesses are able to recover. There is the distinct possibility nationally, most downtowns are looking at their small businesses saying, are they gonna cut back? Can they make it? The Small Business Administration has pretty much shut off now the flow of additional loans. They're still trying to catch up with the onslaught of the ones that they first released. So we don't know what comes next. Again, that will depend on congressional action. We do have, I mentioned the revenues go down, but the expenses don't go down the same level. We are seeing most expenditures are not dropping. We have fewer folks in town, but we still have a fair number of call volume. It didn't drop exponentially with the drop in population. That applies across the board. We have to pump the water has to flow. That costs a certain amount of money regardless of the number of people tapped into the system. We do still have, as we talked about this time last year, was an amazing opportunity of infrastructure improvements. That need has not gone away. That backlog still exists. We have made phenomenal strides in parks this year, in streets, in doing repairs in water and sewer. However, we still have a phenomenal amount of work left to do, and so that becomes a prioritization issue. Obviously, the strategic priorities that the council set last year through the strategic map, we hold to those. We continue with that. You've given us that direction. We can keep that in mind and try to continue to make progress, this being one of the largest on that list. So our approach going into FY 2020 has obviously been a little bit revised from this time last year. We have to ensure stability. Part of being a local government is ensuring the stability of your community, both in safety, health, welfare. We want to ensure everybody's okay to the best of our ability. We need to cover our debt requirements. We must maintain our payments. We do not want to be in a position of default. Bad things come from that, and they are long-term bad things. So we definitely do not want to skip any payments. We have to maintain our reserves for the same reason. We need to have adequate balances. It is very tempting to say, let's draw down our reserves a little bit. We got some room. We got a little bit of cushion. We can draw down on it. We have to be very, very careful because we do not know the duration. This is not like recovering from a tornado. The tornado comes, it flattens things, it leaves. It's relatively straightforward. Pandemics are infuriatingly not straightforward. So we need to ensure that we're looking at our cash flow, our future demands, and obviously our bond rating. The bond rating is a recurring theme because that is the instrument by which we can build the community back, by which we can continue all those infrastructure needs. We need to size our operations back to our ongoing revenues, looking at our recurring revenues and our operations and making sure that we're continually matching those up. Stabilizing our impacts to our residents. We do not want to see huge swings in fees, charges, anything like that. We don't want to see huge swings in services either. It's very upsetting to residents, and it contributes to anxiety if they see 1 week the parks are open, and 6 weeks later the parks are all shut, and up and down and in and out. That's very traumatizing, and we want to ensure that there's confidence and stability. So we also want to maintain, as I mentioned, the progress on the priorities you set. They're very specific. We've got that direction. We want to ensure that we're conveying to the citizens forward motion, progress. The community has not shut down. The organization has not shut down. We continue to serve. We want to improve our processes and services and lower our operating costs without cutting staff. First and foremost, we are a service organization. In order to provide services, we have to have people. We have some phenomenal staff here. We have a lot to be proud of. Our employees are amazing in so many ways. They are needed to keep the level of service and even improve it to citizens. We are just always mindful that in order to keep them, we have to make sure that we're very careful in making sure we streamline our processes and that we're always looking for opportunities to lower the operating costs to keep the services flowing.
Without cutting staff, but are we still hiring or are we on a hiring freeze?
We have limited the hiring to those positions in police and in water and sewer right now. We are currently, we go back and forth, we discuss them based on need, so I wouldn't call it a full freeze. But definitely, can you live without this for a little while? How is this gonna impact citizens?
How about the landfill, cause, a lot of issues with dumpsters not being emptied in a timely manner, that's.
So there's a couple of issues involved in the landfill, one of which is staff, some of it is equipment. Actually, next week, I'm hoping to bring forward some equipment resolutions, for your consideration to help in that area. We are looking to open up the, CDL positions in the landfill because they are higher paying, they're higher demand, I mean, those are tough jobs, but they are higher paying. We're opening those up to internal staff first. That opportunity then, those will be filled, it is considered a priority position. From there, where the remaining seats are, there'll be conversation of how we conduct business without filling them, or whether we absolutely need to fill them.
Still from Paul to pay Peter.
Hopefully not, but we may have to.
If you're putting it internally, you're
So-
gonna take staff away from one to fill this one.
It depends on where they're coming from as to
Yeah.
whether or not it gets filled. I mean, the reality is we don't wanna risk the staff that we have by hiring new staff in a position that I'd rather give the opportunity to internal staff. So we are looking at how do we shift some of our activities. Do we shift some of the things that we would contract out and instead bring in-house so that our existing staff can do it, particularly if things have slowed down a little bit and we're not all running 1,000 miles an hour. Maybe we can do some of it in-house instead of contracting out to preserve those positions. The long-term effect of short-term instability, we need to avoid those knee-jerk reactions. That's a stability issue all the way. We don't have, as I mentioned, any historical precedent, either nationally or locally, to react to. So we're kind of flying a little bit, we get to blaze our own path. I'm eternally the optimist when it comes to things like this because it does give you an incredible opportunity to not have a set of rules you have to play by. There's obviously the legal rules, but you can get amazingly creative. You have no choice. So, the other piece that we're looking at, we're recommending to the council that we delay these capital projects and purchases, the city hall renovation downstairs. Obviously, you have some motivation. I mean, you can't have people in up close and personal, so building a room for them is not necessarily an immediate need. Some of the other landscaping and park projects, the pool replacement funding, $670,000 that was raised from property taxes to be set aside. We're recommending that this year perhaps we don't set it aside, that we keep that in order to keep operating. Also the ADA transition plan, we have brought some of that work in-house to do the surveying and GIS activities, and so we'd like to just kind of freeze it with the internal activities and delay the remainder to a prior year. We continue to make progress, but we'll have to slow down. So the impact to the general fund, we're looking at approximately a 30% loss in sales tax revenue for current fiscal year. Wow. It's almost $2.5 million, 2.4, yes, it stings a bit. Estimated shortfall in the criminal justice center is $300,000, and we have identified budget gaps in various areas of another $400,000. We anticipate through some of the holding of positions being able to recoup $150,000. That's from April forward. So the retention bonus authorized by council utilized vacancy savings for the first half of the year. So this would be utilizing savings for the second half of the year. Estimated opportunity for operational savings, again, we're pushing everybody in the building, in City Hall and out, to tighten the belt a little bit, think twice. Do we really need that? Do we have other supplies elsewhere? How do we share amongst each other? Things like that. Really pushing that mindset. The opportunity for delaying the capital projects, as I listed, is about $1.9 million. Looking for the carryover from 2019 as we scrub through the audit and all those details, we're finding places that we can pull. That leaves us a bit of a gap, and so we're still working on that, and we'll be bringing forward recommendations to you. The hot fund for the current year, we're looking at least 50%. At this point, we suspect that a 50% cut is probably optimistic. That could go significantly higher. That's $1.9 million. If we just go with 50%, the impact will be majority felt in the fund balance. So unlike all the other funds, hot funds are spent forward. So whatever money you earn this year, you get to spend next year. You don't get to, it's not a standard accrual process. We paid for this year from last year's money. So this year's money drops. We have to absorb anything in the fund balance, and that means there's almost nothing available for next year. We must meet our debt reserve and legislative requirements. Those are an obligation of the baseball complex on certificates of obligation, and the requirements of the legislation that allows us to even issue that debt or collect hot funds. It all has very specific reporting and usage requirements. So much of that is wrapped up in the fund balance. We have distributed the $850,000 to outside agencies for the current year, and we're proposing to delay renovations of the downtown building that was purchased a year or so ago, a little over a year ago, and postpone the construction of the downtown parking lot. The debt service payments started this year. They actually start 9/30/2020, so they are part of the current fiscal year of $850,000. So this brings us to a bit of a tight pocket going into next fiscal year. Recognizing that the first year of operating expenses for the baseball complex, we estimate to be close to $500,000. We're still ironing out what that looks like, but obviously we have to staff it up, we have to bring it forward. We also must operate that baseball complex upon completing it in order to comply with state law. And we need to pay that debt. And we don't want to do it all from hotel motel. If the hotel motel funds are insufficient for either the reserve or the debt payments, that must come from the general fund. If it comes from the general fund, it is a black mark on our bond rating. I can't tell you what that's going to translate to or how the rating agencies would view it. I just know that they usually view that very negatively. The general fund must pay it regardless. So then that alters the conversation we just ran through. Debt service payments are relatively flat at $850,000, and the debt reserve is basically $1.7 million.
And the baseball park can be put on hold.
If we were to do so, we would have to return the funds from the debt, and frankly, I really don't recommend it necessarily because it opens up a whole lot of other conversation. We do have that option. If we were to do so, that would remove obviously the $850,000. We would return the $10 million net of whatever we've expended and whatever we're obligated to.
I would suggest that if that's going to be considered, that it needs to be done now rather than letting the contract continue. Because anything that we do expend on the baseball project, although we do have the cash flow to cover these initial expenses, we would still be required under the legislation to either reimburse that money out of the general fund or to have something to show that's generating room nights in hotels. And so if we return it, we need to return it now.
So minimize that impact.
Minimize that impact.
And what's the effect of the price? Say we pick it back up again, what's the cost of it gonna be from the 18 and into a new cost? And could we go to our state reps and ask them for a delay or a change in the law?
Well, we have contracts, so if we violate those contracts, then we have to pay the penalties, don't we?
Likely.
So,
Some might not even be in the best interest.
So the baseball club's continue.
well, at least for what we paid for, and then maybe put a halt on it a little bit. Maybe, I don't know.
The obligation becomes, as Seth said, the issue is beyond just the cash flow piece. We can pay what we've incurred, return the funds. We still are under an obligation to demonstrate that funds expended from HOT are actually generating traffic back.
But at this
And
point in
hotels.
time, without completion, we can't.
We can't do that. So we would then have to reimburse the HOT fund back from the general fund. So say we've expended $2.5–3 million, that would have to come out of the general fund to pay back the
All
HOT
at
fund.
one time.
I think a formal loan of a short duration, 3 to 5 years, might be possible. However, that would be subject to the state controller's agreement.
Cause I'd hate to see it, I'd hate to send the money back with the fear of what it's gonna cost us when we check it back up again. And like, Councilman Baca said, you know, we gotta keep, we've whipped this horse for years now, and we're finally seeing something.
Yeah.
If we stop it now, we probably will never pick it up again.
And I guess even if you were to stop it, those funds are limited to certain things, and maybe
Yes.
you can just use them.
Use it for something else.
They're not transferable. Okay. So, kind of moving backwards, looking at fiscal year 2021, starting October 1st for the general fund, we're looking again about $3 million. That leaves us about $7 million. We currently budget about 10. So that drops us rather materially. Estimated reduction in permit fees and charges probably by half. We don't expect any increase in property tax revenue, even though under the law we have some ability to modify, obviously, the calculation, but the assessed values, appraised values are moving just a little bit up, not enough to actually generate increased revenue. So we're expecting it to be relatively flatline based on what we're seeing from the Reeves County Appraisal District. We also recognizing we did just raise taxes last year, so we want to be mindful. We do not know what our market increases are looking like for utilities, healthcare, supplies, materials, things like that. Obviously, we're not the only ones taking a step back going, now what? Healthcare, we've been receiving relatively optimistic, as in single-digit increases, estimates. We don't know that that will hold. We have a much better bargaining position because of the HSA. However, the market as a whole has been somewhat upended. So our possible, we will have to look at what services become a top priority and whether or not there's personnel associated with those. Those will be a conversation for, do we have to reduce? Looking, again, as I mentioned, shifting our efforts from the external contracts to what can we do in-house. Trying to preserve our positions. We want to maintain our community, and most of our employees are part of our community. So recognizing we need them on a lot of levels, in a lot of ways. We want to ensure that as much as we can, but we do need to look at the top priority, obviously, being services to citizens. And then how can we shift? There's some things we can bring in that we, due to the demand, have had to contract out. Can we bring some of that in-house? We do really want to look at avoiding drastic measures. So we don't want to up or down. If we have sudden increases or pay increases or subsidized healthcare, that's obviously disruptive. It's a nice thing to do, but it is disruptive. Furloughs, layoffs, things like that, pay cuts, those are also disruptive. Not near as pleasant, but again, equally as disruptive. So we're trying to, we really want to emphasize the need for this stability. Giving people something that they can at least know what's coming, even if they don't like it, they at least know, as opposed to the ups and downs. Many governments across the country are automatically lurching into layoffs, furloughs, pay cuts. We don't want to go there as much as possible. I happen to be a huge advocate of not jumping into the death of 1,000 cuts and nipping and cutting or doing, wholesale slashing. My background has been with a number of bankrupt agencies, and I can, just from experience, organizations that are able to really look at how strategically how they're going forward, what they want to look like, what's most important to them, are going to be the most successful long term. We'll get through this. How we get through it is a decision of the organization, and obviously you as their leaders, our leaders. Our next steps, we will be looking to bring to you a budget amendment. We're still hashing out for May 14th, whether or not we'll be able to bring that to you, but definitely in June. I would expect there to be some small ones, and certainly as information becomes available, we will bring those to you. Looking to do the budget reviews June and July, we are required to set the tax rate for June 25th. We are not recommending at this moment any change in that tax rate. But with the shift in the dates, trying to schedule this so that it's always at your regular meeting and minimize the number of extra time that you need to put into this. Hearings on the budget and the tax rates are July 9th and 23rd, and then adopting it on August 13th. Obviously, at any point you have questions or want more information or need more research or even just want to talk through ideas, please do not hesitate to call. My job is to help you make informed decisions.
Melanie, I thought that because of the law changes that the tax rate would have to go down.
The tax rate would go down if the assessed value were to go up significantly, because the law requires that your total revenues cannot exceed a 3.5% increase. So at this point, the appraisal level looks to be about the same, maybe a little bit better, definitely not 3.5% up. So with a flat tax rate, it could probably, at this point, I think we're seeing less than 0.5% to 1% growth. Which, as we see, as we start to see what activity comes out 6, 9, 12 months from now, we can make better projections long term. But it's really a question of whether we're looking at an 18-month situation or a 36 to 5-year, 36-month to 5-year situation. It did take most agencies to come out of the 2008 recession about 8 years. But it was a very, very different looking recession. So we don't know what we're looking at. I don't say that lightly. It's more of recognizing that we just need to be mindful that our decisions, your decisions in particular, have impacts not just on the direct services, but on the mood and the atmosphere of the community. And their confidence in our ability to meet their needs, as well as their confidence in the community's ability to be resilient. A friend of mine used to say, you aim for stability, and then you go into sustainability, and then you want to be resilient. So we still might have had a little bit of a setback into, needing to really focus on stability, but that doesn't mean we lose sight of our goal to be resilient.
And I know that me and you discussed this about going to the entities that actually collect taxes for assistance. Can't we do that? Hospital, school, these people collect the taxes regularly of residents.
The county probably couldn't, they're more hamstrung, maybe the
The county has
yeah.
a lot
The
of
county
money,
will have the most flexibility in terms of contributing to local services.
but they can't contribute.
In certain ways, they can certainly purchase services from us, and they could designate certain activities as things that benefit the county as a whole as well as the city. So certainly anything on a county road, anything in a major park.
So that's something that we
cemetery,
could
things
be
like that.
looking into on projects
And we are.
that may say, we need your help, you're gonna have to help, or we didn't get it done.
That's part of the citizens, part of their precinct. That's what I keep pestering them about,
Yeah,
They're responsible inside the citizens as well as the county, but
yeah.
their votes come from inside the citizens.
We are very much the regional hub. So recognizing, as we talked last year about landfill, we have to think in terms of regional solutions. Water and sewer, we have to think in regional solutions, and I know that that's been a part of the conversations with the county as well. This is, if we sneeze, they get the flu. Pardon the analogy, but we get the hiccups. They get stomach pains too.
And then we look at that, what projects we may approach them with.
Yeah,
You have an idea?
yeah, and that'll be part of what we're hoping to bring, in the first meeting in June.
Okay. 'Cause I'm sure the judge is willing to do something, so.
We certainly hope so, as well as the rest of the
I
commission.
think we'll have that conversation as well.
When will the ESDs be funded?
So the ESDs are funded, and coming on next Thursday is the opportunity to cease our ambulance fee and start invoicing the ESD for all expenses from December 1 forward. So that will actually provide a little relief to citizens as well, because they'll no longer be paying for ambulance fees, but since they're already paying for ESD 2. The conversations with ESD 1 are still ongoing.
Will we be reimbursed for what we put in since it was initiated?
No, they voted, and that's one of the other items is the council's willingness to accept. They voted that because they did not actually start receiving the funds until December, that their first deposit came in December, that they would be willing to reimburse from December forward. Recognizing that the ambulance fund is upside down, the general fund has heavily subsidized that for a number of years. We're recommending that we cease the ambulance fee as of the end of May. So June forward, it would not be, and then what's been collected and not reimbursed, we would, obviously, what has been paid, we would cover what was paid out first 2 months of the year. But also the outstanding obligations back to the general, at least reduce some of them, because it's a pretty hefty 1.8 million, I believe, $0.7 million that the general fund has loaned back to the ambulance fund. That's not going to be fully reimbursed, fully cleared at any point, but at least this would help it a little bit. But definitely June forward, then citizens are paying once for that service and not trying to catch up from past things and only paying ESD2. The ESD2 will reimburse us then going forward. So that's
Again, at the 2021, I mean, what's the concern factor? Percentage concern factor, will be okay? I mean, your opinion. Can we make 2021?
I'll give Melanie a minute to think about what her.
Please.
Her job is to freak out regardless when it comes to money, okay?
I'll put out my opinion of what 2021 holds for us. And that is, as a city, we are obligated to get our expenditures to balance with our revenues. We don't get to act in the deficit like the federal government. We don't get to print our own money. Those are just not options to us. Depending on what the activity is decides whether or not we can go into our reserves. It is a bad habit to use reserves for ongoing expenses. We do keep, at least we shoot for a 25% reserve, so that if we really do get into that tight of a spot, we are able to cover operating expenses for 3 months out of the year. But obviously that is not a long-term solution at all. That is meant to be the worst case scenario where there is simply no money coming in. We're fortunate that our economy is not to that point. I've worked in a city where we were at that point, and I hope never to return to that situation again. But with the idea of balance in mind between expenditures and revenues, we will be obligated to present a balanced budget. And so we will have to make those tough decisions over the next coming weeks and months to find out what are truly the priorities, how are we going to meet those priorities, and at what level of service are we going to be able to meet those priorities. But it will have to be balanced when it's all said and done.
And of course, one of many concerns is, since we've started, or I've started, and of course Councilman Aldana started, we realize that our wonderful town is old and a lot of repairs are needed here and there, whether it's a pipe here, a pipe there, so we know that is something that will always happen till we can replace everything that needs to be replaced. Of course, is that something that you're gonna have to probably be looking into as well? What will break, what will we need right there and then, because again, we know our town is older. We know a lot of stuff has never been done to it. People wait till something breaks before they fix it. And sometimes it's an easy fix and it'll break again. So I guess that's a concern as well, that 6 months that I've been, 8 months that I've been, we've cut some budget in areas where things have been broken. We have to replace 3rd Street twice, in fact. I'm just saying, I guess we need to account for stuff that we're gonna have to fix again and again.
One of the pieces that I obviously I have my concerns. You pay me to look at it and to be a little bit conservative, because I wanna ensure I'm never having to apologize for being short. That is an infuriating, frankly humiliating position to ever find myself in. That being said, I'm very much a pragmatist, and that we do have a lot that needs to be done. One of the hallmarks of the last 6 months in particular has been how much we're getting done. Staff has been energized at a level that hasn't been seen for a long time. People are getting things done. That costs money. So when I refer to the budget gaps, those are some of the things coming to light, is that the data that we utilized was incomplete. It was based on a much lower expectation level. The amazing thing, the fantastic thing, I mean, it's a glorious thing to be able to say to a council, do you realize how much is happening now? It's fantastic. The problem is now we're kind of hitting a skid on how do we keep that momentum and still stay solvent.
Yeah.
We are looking at, you know, I've talked with Seth, am I fairly confident we can get through FY20 without having to cut the knees out from under us? Absolutely. It's not going to be easy. And, you know, yes, I am very much that, are you sure about that? Every time I see something, and I lectured the department heads pretty fiercely this morning on we will abide by policy, we will abide by procedure, and you will think twice before you ask for it. But the other side of that is going into FY21, I cannot make that promise. I recognize that if my most informed projection, the best one I have right this moment, comes true, our fund balance is nowhere near 25%. It's solvent, but it does significant damage long term. We don't have the ability then to weather a 2 or 3 year recession or recovery. We will make it through one, but we can't make it through two. That would be irresponsible and unprofessional of me to tell you, yeah, that's okay. It's not okay. It's a serious concern. We would not have the ability should we have, you know, say we have a complete main blowout and half the road fall out. We would not have the ability to address that. That's not acceptable. Recognizing that we have to think through our priorities. With the general fund in particular, you're talking about 25% total revenue cut. Maybe if things are not too bad and we start to bounce back pretty well, maybe 20%. That's not a lot of margin. So we think through, what does that mean? Okay, well, capital projects are all put on hold, but should they be? What is most important to the community's well-being, safety and well-being? Obviously, CJC and sanitation being the funds most fragile right now, they're my bigger concern in terms of how do we build them where they need to be. CJC, we're kind of strapped. We have a long-term contract that met the needs that we negotiated it under. We have a building that's falling apart. It's met its lifespan. Our capacity to replace that building is going to depend on our ability to get external loans or grants. So there's a lot of balancing, a lot of moving parts that maybe not as straightforward when we say this is our money coming in, this is our money going out in the general fund. There's a lot of other players that come into this that could disrupt that balance a little bit. So we are hashing frequently, what do we come to you with a recommendation? Because we have to make sure that the recommendation is one we professionally can stand behind this year, next year, 3 years from now, and that you can live with, should you choose to accept it. But also hearing from you what's most important. What is the top priority? We have to look at where the most activity is relative to the staffing. We have to look at where the most demand is and where the greatest community need is relative to that. Productivity is a factor. Those are things that we have to look at.
And of course, Melanie, as a money person, we need you to not hold that back in a sense when it comes to the council, because again, you're gonna have to really lay it on their laps as well, because again, sometimes we can try and there's no way. So then it comes to these guys to make a way or no way. Because projection is nothing will change until November. And that's a projection. Any sense of normality? I don't believe we'll know normality until they find a vaccine. People are not gonna trust this thing. People are not gonna trust getting it. Those that have parents, that I know that have parents, they don't let them out of the house at all, period. Which I would probably do with my parents. You ain't going nowhere. I will bring you what you need. So, November, any kind of normality, I don't see. I see people anxious to come out. I see pictures of people that wanna get out, do things. I don't know. I think that what I'm trying to say is, you need to give us a bottom line when it comes to you.
You have some very tough decisions coming up, and there's no buts about it. I, have never been accused of being a shrieking violet, or particularly quiet and demure, particularly when it comes to finances to the city. I try to be tactful, I try to be, dignified and respectful, but the reality is you have some very tough choices. We will have to cut, there's no question of that. Do I think we can get through FY20 without massive hurt? Yes, but FY20 is less than 6 months long. That's 5 more months. We have to make the decisions that go into effect October 1, no later than August 13th. So that means the next 3 months, we need to think this through. I need you to be brutally honest with me about priorities.
Well, the priorities are our services, the key essential services to our town. And that could be water, sewer, safety, police. The parks take a little backseat to me right now. Sanitation, yeah, and all those
Health,
services.
safety, and welfare.
Yes, but everything else, we're gonna have to cut it to seam starting now, and as the mayor's asking,
What does that look
and
like?
you're telling us we're faced with tough decisions to make, but it'll get better, but we gotta do them now in order to get the better quicker in the end.
Yes, that's a perfect description of it.
And I believe, and I'm very optimistic about things. I never see nothing in a negative thing because I don't wanna think about it, because things happen, I can't stop it, I'll just step through it and keep on going. This is where I believe, and Councilman Orona kinda mentioned a little bit, this is where the community has to come together, and what I'm talking about is a community, the other entities of the community, the county, all have to come together to make Pecos strong. Because Pecos is a seat of this county, and without Pecos, there ain't no county. And the majority, the hospital, there would be no Pecos, no hospital, no schools, no nothing. So this is where we need to get everybody together and what's our next step together. We're all Pecos strong. Reeves County is part of Pecos and the biggest town of this county. But I believe if everybody loves Pecos like I do, we all need together, no matter if I'm part of the hospital, part of the school, part of the county. We all need to come together and work it because it's gonna affect everybody. If for some reason the town suffers, we start cutting people, their service is gonna be cut. If we cut sanitary, how are we gonna handle that? Or, different things, and that's gonna affect the people in the county, the people in the hospital, the people in the school. So, we need, I think we need to step back, all the entities, sit down and say, okay, how are we gonna do this together? It's not about just Pecos, not about just Reeves County, or it's not just about the school district, it's about coming all together, how we're gonna fix this. Because, yeah, it can be very bad in 2021 if we don't step up right now and say, hey, what do you need? How can we help? How can we do this? Yeah, there's some priorities that maybe we don't need that service at the moment, but the services that are needed, we need to take care of, and it's gonna affect everybody. So I don't know how we all come together as unified, but a county, a town, a family divided will go down, and we sure don't need to go down. We've been for the last 3-4 years, I mean, blowing and going. Blowing and going, all of a sudden here we got hit.
And the thing
But we
that-
need to step up.
The thing that we need to do is, you're our voice, but you're our voice of money. And I really do appreciate what you've done since you've been here, and that, I still remember the first words you said, if there ain't any money, I'm telling you no. I'll always remember those words, and I appreciate that very much. But we need to tell our citizens, this is what we're faced with, this is where we're gonna look out first and foremost first. These services that are crucial. The rest has to take us a step back, because the money's gonna have to go channel to the services and to the employees to keep the services moving. That way they understand, we talk about being transparent, and we need to be upfront with them now. And start doing this, what you're, in my understanding, you're telling us to do. Start cutting the strings now, start pulling back now.
We need to. One of the things that we have been peeling back over the last year or longer, even before I got here, is how we do business. What are our habits that aren't serving us best? We have identified a number of those, and you have supported us in making some of those changes. They haven't all been very pleasant, and they certainly haven't all been very well received, but those need to continue. We have to clean up our billing structures. We have to clean up our collections. We have, unfortunately, one of the lowest collection rates I've ever seen. That's not something that's sustainable. We have to think of how we do it. That's a staff obligation. The support that is needed in that is when the screening starts, or my cousin, or whoever, or a small town. That's a wonderful blessing, but it also means that it's uncomfortable when some of these decisions come down.
Especially
and it's
right
really
now, with
pushy.
the economy the way it is, and we're gonna have to go strong for every penny that's owed to the city for us to keep afloat. That's the other understanding that
Well, and
people
it's
need to know.
not fair to those who pay.
Yes, ma'am.
That really is one that gets me fired up.
Mm.
Is why should Joe, who's paying his bill, have to pay more because Danny won't pay his?
Mhm. Yeah.
That's not an obligation that's
Mhm.
fair certainly for the government to allow to continue. As we explore that, as we get more data, as we get more information, we'll bring these forward. So that you know these are part of those steps to ensure that every investment made by the citizens in their government is generating the most it can. Because that is what that's the trust you've given to us, particularly in finance, is to protect, maintain, maximize these resources. These are a trust from the public. And we take that very seriously, and that will be part of this conversation. Certainly we'll be working very closely with community engagement team to find ways to communicate, to let people be a part of the conversation as well in terms of their concerns or where they see opportunities. Obviously, we all want more and we want to pay less. That's not an option. We will get less is being paid, we will have less. There's just no other way for that equation to work. And we will definitely be bringing forward, probably pretty rapid fire over the next 3 months, changes, policies, procedures, things to try and, we're stepping it up as hard and fast as we can to try and get the tools optimized. That we're actually doing everything that we've been entrusted with and making sure that money's doing what it's supposed to be and that everybody's paying their fair share. As we go through that, we're also going to be bringing to you recommendations of where we think, hearing your feedback, these are the places that we recommend the cuts. Because there will have to be. There's no question of that. I don't want to speculate beyond 21 because I really don't have that good crystal ball. There's a part of me that loves a little science and goes, ooh, you can do this and that. And that's really not a safe place to play right now because it does impact people's confidence and then you're creating an outcome that you don't want. I want to remain, as you say, optimistic. We have an incredible position that this community has not had historically, and that's the ability to weather this with flying colors. That's a gift that has been built by the council over the last few years, and we wanna preserve it. And if we can keep that theme and that focus, 5 years from now, you're all gonna be sitting there going, yeah, we did. We set a standard nobody else could meet.
Does the city still have or receive royalties from any, oil field operations?
We do, unfortunately, one of the largest that we receive is under the airport, and that can only go to the airport. When we signed the lease, however many years ago, 50 years or however long ago we took over the airport from the federal government, that was one of the stipulations that they made, is that any royalties, revenues, or anything that come from the surface or underneath this airport go back into the airport. So the airport fund is sitting fine.
Nothing.
We do have a little bit that comes in, under the property, where the landfill is at. And
Over here on Elm Street? Couple of wells over there, did we get anything of that?
street.
Elm Street, just down the block, where our
Not
new,
familiar with
Where
that.
Colgate is?
Colgate.
The only ones that we get are from our city-owned property.
Oh, okay, never mind, then, yeah, that's private.
We do
Although
have
we-
leases with Colgate that
We
we're
do.
not receiving much of swap.
Yeah, although we did get a request for someone to buy our royalties on a .0022 acre piece of land the other day.
Mhm.
So that ought to generate quite a bit. But we are receiving some, but right now, you know, no one's pumping, and so even on the ones that will go towards the general fund or utility fund or airport fund or the landfill, you know, that pie gets sliced up pretty good. So that it's not going to be a known quantity that we can rely on.
Well, I'll be honest, I don't envy you guys one bit, because you are the ones who are gonna have to come up with the hard numbers. We're gonna have to make the decision to follow it, or not to follow it, but, on my part, I trust that y'all will come up with what's important for the city. Y'all see it more upfront than what we do. We hear it from you guys. You see it every day, you live it every day. So, apart from that, I commend you for what you're gonna do, because I know y'all are gonna do the best. So,
You are.
You know, we've weathered other storms in the past, we're gonna weather this one.
Yep. You've had a history of this.
I was gonna say,
Oh,
you've been
yeah.
there, right?
We had Rob, Peter, and Paul to pay, not just Rob Peters, and Peter and Paul, and
Well, look at it this way,
Peter Paul, Sam.
today we got an email from one of our vice presidents, and he was talking about the senior class of this year.
Yeah.
If you look back, they were born in when 9/11 happened. Now they're gonna graduate with another great
Another
situation that they can they're gonna, milestones in their lives, you know. The first one they don't remember because they were born. They'll remember this.
And we actually got a good thing this morning on our meeting that the Texas Education has accepted a proposal to have graduation
Yeah, open.
at the field. So
And
as
that's
long as
nice.
we do it after the 29th,
Mm-hmm.
we should be able to hold graduation.
Okay.
We actually had a
Yeah.
meeting today and they're hoping
Awesome.
to, limit each graduate to five
Five
guests,
tickets.
and then they'll seat them together, and then 6 feet the next family, and then 6 feet the next
But
family.
they'll be using both.
There goes my idea, I was gonna say, everybody come out and support them, but it's not.
Yeah, no.
It's parade time.
Well, we can be outside in the parking lot with our
Parking
cars
lot.
honking at them and all
So
that.
we have, you know, we have we have lights out there and
Mhm.
we're gonna get
I
them.
think they've televised it in the past, there's been a live stream.
But I would like to see this broadcasted at the radio, at the coffee kettle, what do they call it?
Yes, I got rescheduled this week,
Mhm.
but I will find out when my next visit is, and I'm sure that, we'll be having
Because
one
we are
on one.
faced, we are faced with some tough decisions to make. You guys gotta do them and present the numbers to us, and we gotta make the decisions. But people, right now, like, we gotta start making cuts right now, at the end of 2020, to come in, hopefully, looking more positive for 2021. People need to understand now that these are the directions we're looking at, and this is what we need to do right now. There's not a lot of room to maneuver, to negotiate on this one. It's pretty much cut and dry to me, that's the way I see it.
That's a good assessment.
Yeah.
There really isn't, you know, a lot of wiggle.
Mm.
There really just isn't.
And like Councilman Tejeda said, we'll get through it. We're just gonna have to tighten up our belts right now and look at what's
Roll up our
important.
sleeves.
The public's going through the same thing that we are, so they know.
Yeah,
They're having to make changes, they're having to cut down.
yeah, yeah.
They know what's going on.
I'm saving money on the other end. I'm not going out spending like I used to.
That's an excellent segue, Councilman, we have heard the request from this council to look at how we can help our citizens during this time. As Melanie discussed earlier, we'll be bringing the ambulance fee, we're grateful to ESD to being willing to step up and start covering that. So that will be on next week's agenda. We'll also be bringing forward, a resolution recommendation on restructuring our sewer, rates structure, thank you, to try to help citizens out right now. As some of you may recall, some months back, we became compliant with how we should have been charging sewer, for our bond, requirements, in that we're charging actual usage. As we dive more and more into it, we realized that our structure was, based off of that 3-month averaging, and so we're rebuilding that, we're identifying some of the shortfalls there. And so, you know, based off of the direction of this council, we are looking at ways that we can help our citizens, and, obviously, those kinds of things can't happen quick enough, but we are trying to do those analysis as quick as we can to get them, a little bit of help, a little bit of cut there.
I really appreciate you guys, like Councilman Corona says,
You know, our citizens look to us, city fathers and city women.
Mothers.
I believe we need to be unified in what we do. Cause they're looking at us. And they want to know that we got things in control. Not that we do really, but but we're working on it.
We may have
with our staff.
make any afterwards.
Right.
And we
Make an
may
effort.
agree or disagree, but at the final analysis of it all is that we come out of here showing a unified front for
Right,
everyone.
exactly.
And I want you guys to remove these political hats and just tell the residents, this is what we're doing, this is what we're looking at, this is what may or may not change.
And we're gonna make some decisions that might not please everybody, but it's something we have to do for the whole.
For
And
the
I'm
sake
not-
of our city, to survive.
Right?
And like Soraya said, I don't care if I have to go and bend the knee and ask some of our entities for help, you know.
No.
If that's what we have to do. That's what we do.
Well, what we could do, since, I don't know about the, you know how we're not holding the entity meetings right now? Maybe we can devise a committee or 2 people from this, like they do the rec department meetings, one from each entity. You know, just appoint some people to go and meet with the county, the school, and say, hey, we need this, we need to do this. You know, we need to take the lead on it. If they're not already, who knows, they may be thinking the same thing we're thinking.
And we need those projects, this
Yes,
is
sir.
what we want help with.
Mhm.
So that's something you guys will have to work with before we approach them. Something that we can show, look, this is what we're looking at.
It's not a
This
want,
is what
it's a-
you can help with.
It's not a want, it's a need, that's what we're after.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Because it's like Councilman said, we're all gonna go through it, so, you know, as a council going through it, but again, you know, I'm glad we don't have any, positive testing, I'm glad. Maybe you wanna help us money wise, but you know what, it helps our citizens not to get sick. I'd rather have that,
Mhm.
so. But we'll figure it out, one day at a time. Are we done?
Yes?
We are if you hit the
I will
gavel.
ask though, for the next budget, meeting, are we going to have actual numbers as far as where we're at right now, where we were last year, what we're looking?
Oh, we did that.
So.
Because I honestly like to know
Yes.
what balances are in certain accounts.
We are, this is a daily request from your city manager to your finance director, and we inch closer daily, but I'm not comfortable promising that. I will get as close as I can. for the first time in heaven knows how long, the city's bank reconciliations, with the exception of our biggest, are actually current. That hasn't happened in at least 2 years.
Would, June be a better date for you? I noticed earlier you said you might lean more on June, you mentioned something.
Yeah, I'm leaning toward June, in terms of the balances. So, in the background of all of this is also that we have the audit that must get done. We have reporting to the bondholders, all those people in the state, everybody else. So that's, lovely little gorilla sitting in the back. We also have the INCO 10 implementation, which we will be bringing an amendment to tie together some twists and changes that we've had to implement. To bring that implementation into place, which is necessary to clean up the accounting and make sure that we streamline our reporting and our billing and all those other lovely little things, we have to have all of our data clean. So that has to be complete by the end of July. So I did bring on a temp with Mr. Sorensen's permission to try, and I've actually pulled some staff from other areas to try and get us current. The only holdup right this time, we've actually narrowed down our holdup significantly to just one area that we are making progress on. But I don't wanna promise something unless I can absolutely deliver it. So I would love to surprise you with it next week, but I'm not gonna promise it to you.
I'd rather wait till June, that way you get more of a better, clear picture of what you're gonna bring to us, and more precise numbers.
I think it's certainly by June we'll have the April sales tax numbers. We just got the May ones, the March ones today. So certainly by the first meeting in June, we will have that. I will not actually be here at the second meeting in May. I am attending my son's graduation in Navarro, so hallelujah. We made it. But we will have, as obviously constant updating on what we have and where we're at. But the June, we will have the April numbers. Those are going to be the most indicative of where we're at and what we're facing. In terms of balances, again, the biggest holdup is general and,
But you will be able to show us where we were at last year this
that's
time.
that actually is the part I'm most
Okay.
uncomfortable with providing you, just because I have not closed those books.
Okay.
We're waiting on just the last little piece.
Okay.
Not waiting, we're actively pursuing, but I keep trying to remind the staff that even though the mountain looks massive in front of us, if you look behind us, we've come a long way.
So everybody's good? Alright, we'll go ahead and adjourn. Time is 7:06. Thank you, guys.
Thank you
Thank
very
you, Ms.
much.
Melanie.
Thank you.